Yes! Hello, my beautiful friends. What an amazing day it is. Welcome back. I hope that your day has been absolutely outstanding thus far. And we're very excited you're here and with us because we got some lawfare, judicial coup, insurrection by those in black robes to talk about today. Of course, we got Brian Murphy queued up, this judge. We've talked about him before. Quick preview on what we're getting into today, then we'll come back and zoom in for further detail. But this is Brian Murphy, right? This was a guy that Joe Biden shoved in there at the very end of his dilapidated term. And now this judge is in open violation of the Supreme Court. That's according to Trump's team, who has now submitted a motion for clarification to the Supreme Court. But we're going to go through this because this guy's been a big problem. He is somebody who is a big fan of some serious criminal entities that will be explained to us courtesy of Senator Schmidt. This case involves all these gangbangers, EAH, armed robbery, second-degree murder. This guy's from Cuba, arson, drug trafficking, felon, attempted first-degree unaliving of someone. We're going to go through it because that judge, Murphy, has now said that Trump has to hang on to these people and can't afuera them out of the country because this is what came down from the Supreme Court. A very short order from the majority of the court. You see it right here, just one paragraph. We'll come back on it. But then a big fat dissent. And the dissent, of course, is the losing position. So why is Judge Murphy saying that he can rely on the dissent to give him justification in this case to hold on to the case? Trump, of course, has responded to this. This is already making its way up to the Supreme Court. Well, it just came down from the Supreme Court. Trump is back there. So we'll hit the highlights on this one. It's a short filing, but Trump is saying, can you please clarify this? Because this judge has lost his stinking mind. We'll see what Trump's team said about that. We've got some good clips out here. Got RFK queued up talking about how all these kids were being trafficked across our border. Stephen Miller was fired up last night after the ruling came down from Brian Murphy. And happy birthday to Clarence Thomas. That was yesterday. I forgot about that. So happy birthday, Clarence. So we'll talk about all that. Major Supreme Court battle. And honestly, John Roberts is getting made to be a fool right now. John, they're snubbing their noses at you. Boasberg, Zenas, now Murphy. All just saying, I guess they are the Supreme Court now, in addition to being the president. So bunch of good stuff coming in. We'll zoom in on further detail on that. And then we got some updates on this Biden Autopen scandal because we saw something very interesting today from the White House. So this person is going to come in and testify. Her name is Neera Tanden. And they were actually, I think, doing interviews today behind closed doors all day today. James Comer was going through all the Autopen stuff. But before they sat down to have their deposition, conversation, interview, whatever you want to call it, they, at the White House, revoked executive privilege. Remember that executive privilege says you don't have to talk about those things, right? You have privilege, just like if you go talk to your pastor or your attorney and somebody asks you questions about those things. What'd you say to your attorney in your defense? Get out of here. Attorney-client privilege. Well, there's a thing called executive privilege too. And Biden's people all say they've got executive privilege. They don't have to talk about anything. But you remember how Joe Biden waived Trump's right to privilege when he came in. He says, look, I'm not enforcing that. All waived. And they all allowed it. Now Trump is waiving the privilege back to them. Oh, how good it feels. So we'll go through that. James Comer was also out today giving us some updates on what's happening with the Autopen. And so it is going to be just a beautiful and memorial stream. Memorable stream. Much better. And we're very glad that you're here and with us. Now, before we jump into any further business on the day, one thing that we have to do, of course, is talk about how things in the markets are a little bit shifty out there, especially with the war that was kind of happening and now not. We have this situation. We got stock markets, mortgages, groceries, gas prices, all sorts of things ebbing and flowing. And if you're a homeowner, you've probably thought, should I call American Financing to refinance and pay off this credit card debt? Then you second guess yourself because of that low mortgage rate that you currently have. But here's the deal. That low rate may not actually be saving you anything if you're drowning in credit card interest at 25% or more. It's tough math no one wants to talk about, but it could be costing thousands of dollars. Now, the fact is, if you're only making minimum payments, that debt could follow you for years. And that's why people call American Financing, because they're saving customers an average of $800 a month by using their equity to finally break free from their credit card debt. So why not just see what's possible? No upfront fees, no pressure, cost you nothing to find out what you could save every month. And if you start today, you may be able to delay 2 mortgage payments. So call American Financing today, 866-887-1201, 866-887-1201, AmericanFinancing.net/Robert. Link there in the description below. And we appreciate American Financing for sponsoring today's episode. All right, now let's get into business on the day, because we've got some serious judicial coup happening right now, courtesy of this judge. And so let's talk about it. A judicial coup, an insurrection is what some people are calling it, all being led by this guy, Brian E. Murphy. At least in this one case. We know we've got several insurrectionary judges percolating all across America. This guy's just one of them. And so today, we're going to see what Trump submitted to the Supreme Court of the United States, because this was submitted there. You can see they're asking for clarification because the Supreme Court sent down an order, and this judge is ignoring it, Judge Brian E. Murphy. And the Senate's not happy about this. Stephen Miller's not happy about this. How can a lower level judge ignore a very clear order that was issued right here, June 23rd, by the Supreme Court of the United States? He's going to use the same technique that we've seen here already employed by Judge Boasberg, which is going to find some other parallel path that he claims he still has power and jurisdiction over to effectuate his outcome. So, in other words, he is a partisan hack who is bypassing the court, trying to find a way to do it. So we'll go back to this one, but let me just share with you what the conversation sounded like today. Libs of TikTok clipped this one for us here and said that this senator called Eric Schmidt was there in the Senate today explaining that this judge, Murphy, who is violating the directive of the Supreme Court, which is to stop his injunction. Remember, this judge and this entire case involves these illegals who were being deported, and the judge says you can't remove them from anything because due process and notice and all this garbage. And so now the question, of course, was always, who are these people? They all are allowed to proceed pseudo-anonymously. And you see their names here like this: DVD, MM, EFD, OCG. Why is that? Because they're covering up their names. Turns out they're gangbangers and criminals. And if you looked it up, you'd probably be able to, if you had their full name and they weren't being protected by hack partisan judges, and we could actually look into their background, we know who they are, which is why they're covering them up and allowing them to proceed as a class, as a bundle, because there's security in obscurity, and they're exercising that to full effect. So here is Senator Schmidt, who is explaining what this is really about in the Senate, calling it what it is: an insurrection under the guise of the law, which is a perversion of their offices and a disgusting manipulation of their sworn oath and ethics.
But on this one in particular, it is worth pointing out what happened yesterday. What happened yesterday, a radical, liberal, progressive, leftist judge, Brian Murphy, who was confirmed in the lame duck session when Joe Biden, President Autopen, may not even have known he was appointing this person.
Probably not.
Approved by the Democrats in the Senate, is now refusing to obey by a Supreme Court order for the deportation of 7 criminal aliens. And let's just do a little bit of tail of the tape. These people are one of them is a convicted arsonist. Another one is an armed robber. Another one is a murderer of an elderly woman. 2 more are murderers. One is a child rapist, and another is a rapist of a person with special needs.
Wow.
These are the people that the Democrats spend their time defending.
It's true. And they go down and have margaritas with them down there in El Salvador.
Now we have a judge, through an act of, dare I say, insurrection.
Yes!
which is a word that's thrown around here all the time,
Say it.
is refusing to abide by the Supreme Court's ruling to say, yeah, actually, when you held up these deportations, you were wrong. We are ordering you to allow these deportations. This judge, Brian Murphy, decided to cite the dissenting opinion, and say, you know what, I'm going to give the Supreme Court the middle finger. I don't want to do it. To sit here and act like they have the moral high ground on obeying court orders and the rule of law, it's all a lie. And the mask has come off because Brian Murphy has shown what this is really all about. The Democrats believe in that, but only when it suits them. In this issue of illegal immigration, I can't actually believe they're doing it. I can't actually believe
it's their constituency.
This 80-20 issue, the American people want to meet mass migration with mass deportations, period. And their willingness to allow assaults on law enforcement officers who are doing their jobs is insane. What you will not hear, you've heard some Democrats disavow the violence, but what you will never hear any one of them say is that, you know what, we need to take a step back and let ICE do their jobs, because they don't really want ICE to do their jobs. And when a president comes in after campaigning on the idea that he was going to deport these 7 people, including an arsonist, a rapist, a murderer, of elderly people, of people with disabilities, that's the line. That's the red line. And now you've got a judge willing to back them up.
Wild that has to be explained to them, but of course it does, and we appreciate Eric Schmidt taking the time to do it. And what's so curious is you're not going to hear much from the Democrats because it's their party, it's their constituency. If they get rid of all the illegals, where's all their money going to go? They need government money to help the illegals, help migration and all the things. They need that coffer to be flush with cash. And they also need the apportioned congressional seats. And they also need the fake illegal votes. Even if it's not for the president, you might say they're not voting in those elections, but they're voting for certain individuals like this woman right here. Now, this came over from Bill Malugin. Shocking video of the mayor of Cudahy, a city in southeast LA County. Why are they fighting for these people so hard? It's because they think this is their land. We've already talked about it. It's Aztlan, the Reconquista, La Reconquista. It's been endorsed by the president of Mexico. If they tariff our extortion of their government capital and their country's money, then we're going to mobilize, is what she said. If you dare to ask the president of the Senate about his opinion on it, he'll hold up a map saying California, Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, all of them, Texas, belong to Mexico, even though we signed the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo that they apparently aren't honoring, which is very unmanly and unbecoming of them to do that, to back out of your word. Pathetic. But FBI is saying that there may be an investigation here. Fox News is reporting there's an investigation into this woman because she is under investigation after posting this video on social media where the mask slipped, in which she appears to call for 18th Street and Florencia 13 gangbangers in LA to defend their territory from ICE, even urging leadership to get your effing members in order, okay, gangbangers? Because this is their team. This is their invasionary force. And they feel so confident and have so much bravado about it that they'll post TikToks about it. I'm told Cynthia Gonzalez posted the video late last week, then deleted it. Oops! And that the FBI later visited her home, and she's under active federal investigation for encouraging gangbangers. Gonzalez posted on her social media that the FBI came to her house and she needs a lawyer. Oops. FBI LA tells Fox they can't confirm or deny an investigation, but they condemn any call for gang violence, especially by the vice mayor of the city, right? You're wondering, why are they not taking action? Well, so maybe they're under control of foreign cartels and foreign money and foreign powers for a foreign invasionary force in our country. FBI tells Fox they cannot confirm or deny this. We've reached out to Gonzalez via phone and email and are awaiting a response. No response yet from the city of Cudahy either. We'll update as we get more, right? And so we're going to play this. There's going to be an F-bomb, I think, in here, courtesy of this gangbang-loving vice mayor of LA. And if you got children, earmuff at time or mute it for a minute or two until this video's done. But here is the vice mayor of LA explaining why the gangbangers are not helping her cause.
Not for nothing, but I want to know where all the cholos are at in Los Angeles. 18th Street, Florencia. Where's the leadership at?
Yeah.
Because you guys are all about territory, and this is 18th Street, and this is Florencia. You guys tag everything up, claiming hood. And now that your hood's being invaded by the biggest gang there is, there ain't a peep out of you.
White
it's
people.
Everyone else who's not about the gang life that's out there protesting and speaking up. We're out there like fighting our turf, protecting our turf, protecting our people.
Yeah.
And like, where you at?
Yeah.
Bien calladitos, todos los chulitos. I'm like,
come.
Dude, they're running amok all up in your, on your streets and in your city. And peep, when the big gang guns come in, nothing but like quiet, and we're out here, the regular ones that have never been jumped in, out here calling things out, trying to organize people, trying to do the thing. So don't be trying to claim no block, no nothing. If you're not showing up right now, trying to like help out and organize, I don't want to hear a peep out of you once they're gone, trying to claim that this is my block. This was not your block. You weren't even here helping out. So whoever's the leadership over there, just fucking get your members in order.
Wow. All right. So gangbangers, take your directive from the vice mayor of LA and stop being so pathetic. Okay, SA? Get out there, get on the streets and fight for the vice mayor. This is our land. This is our territory. What do you think? Trumpers are going to come in here and take this over? What are you going to do? Allow America to reclaim this land again that we are reconquering? And this is coming from an official person in an official account. She doesn't seem drunk or anything. That was my first thought. I'm like, she's just hammered right now, just dumping some stupid videos out there. She looks pretty dang sober, out some party, and there's some dude over on the other end of the camera egging her on. And this is where they're probably planning with Mayor Bass and Newsom how to engage against Trump, right? This is insurrectionary language, talking about foreign gangs taking over their territory, kicking ICE out, getting rid of Americans, I guess, who have stolen their land for them. This is the Reconquista in action. And so we got the litigation coming up. But of course, this is also what Eric Schmidt said. This is who this person is representing in LA, who Gavin Newsom is representing. This is the Democratic Party in large part representing these types of people. Eric Schmidt chronicles it for us. 7 people, all of them very bad. These are 7 pseudo-anonymous illegal aliens. They're all citizens of foreign countries. We're going to get to the litigation here in a minute. Their own governments refuse to take them back because they're such pieces of work. We are no longer going to be suckers. We're not going to take care of all these monstrous people in our country. Get out. This person, EAH, who was given pseudo-anonymous protections and shielded as part of a class action by federal judges. See if you get that benefit. If you're ever, God forbid, charged with a crime, or someone in your life, God forbid, is charged with a crime. See if you ever get the benefit of having your criminal record sealed and your identity protected by federal judges. Never happened. A native and citizen of Cuba, armed robbery, second-degree murder, felon in possession, and more. The senator has access to info that we don't have, but this guy was in Florida, breaking all these Florida laws. Armed robbery, second-degree murder, deadly weapon, violation of multiple crimes back in 1999. JMR, another one. Citizen of Cuba, came to our country illegally. He was convicted of other crimes. Sentenced 15 years probation, arson in the second degree, burning stuff, trafficking in cocaine, convicted possession of a firearm. You're a felon. You can't have a firearm. He says, I don't give a crap. I'm in your country illegally. I'll own whatever I want. Tien is another citizen of Laos, also convicted of robbery and murder of a 64-year-old woman, protected by a judge, because this person didn't get due process. How much due process did that 64-year-old woman have before she was murdered? On November 13th, he was convicted in California, first-degree murder, killed an old woman, was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Trying to get him out of our country, but they won't. Conviction records and media reporting shows that he murdered a 64-year-old German tourist and seriously injured her husband near a scenic outlook. I thought he was just going to be here for farming and his PhD scholarship. Yeah, is what they keep telling us. but they're liars. How about this? JMG, another native and citizen of Mexico. Second-degree murder for him. He's a gangbanger officially. Got 25 years in prison, was ordered removed to Mexico by an immigration judge. Waived his appeal. Also, he admitted to being a member of a criminal organization. And while in custody, he incurred multiple disciplinary violations, some of these violations related to gang activity. Here's another one, Burma. He's convicted of doing the most heinous things you ever possibly could to a child under the age of 12, okay? Judge Brian Murphy protecting KM, a PDF file, who came into our country from Burma and abused someone under the age of 12. How under the age? Doesn't matter, but wild. Now, NM, a native and citizen of Burma, also Ring a person with handicapped and mental handicap, being mentally handicapped, incapable of defending themselves, which is another much more serious crime in a lot of places. Assault in the first degree, sentenced to 12 to 14 years in prison, tried to penetrate a victim, and she was mentally and physically incapable of resisting. Democrats, number one hero, PDF files, and elder abusers, and worse. TTP, another person, also protected by federal judges and the Democratic Party. He is convicted of murder and second-degree assault. He says, Eric Schmidt says, the people here are Americans, murdered Americans, robbed Americans, burned American houses down. Biden judges now are blowing up, defying the Supreme Court to just attempt to bring them back into the United States. He says, from violent cartels to criminal and gang members to Iranian sleeper cells, the Democrats let these people into our countries. We have to get them out. And yeah, they want them back here. So, and dragged back to the country. In fact, I think these people actually might be gone already. So the judge said, bring them back. And Trump said, they're gone already. We're not bringing them back. So let's zoom in on further detail on what's happening here now that we've got the vice mayor of LA encouraging her cholos and essays to get out there and start cracking heads on the streets. We saw this is what the Supreme Court sent down to us. From the Supreme Court of the United States of America, in the case brought by illegal class action gangbangers against the United States, saying, we need more due process, much more than anyone else has ever gotten in the history of America, because we're illegal aliens in 2025 all of a sudden. Here is a very short order from the majority. This, as you can see, is going to be a 6-3 decision. You see here, we've got the three, Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson all joining in the dissent. And that means the majority, we got the 6. So this is a party line split. And what's so insane about this case is the dissent who loses the battle. That's the point of having 6-3, is now going to, I guess, be the majority holding, upon which this lower level judge, Brian Murphy, who was just shoved in there during Joe Biden's last bout of dementia, he's now going to use that as leverage to continue to order Trump to do the things. Now, Trump has responded, also gone right back to the Supreme Court and is demanding action on this. And so we'll get there. But here is what the Supreme Court said, just to get started. This case, of course, is about dragging those people back who are already deported out of the country. The judge says you've got jurisdiction to do that. The lower level court, Trump says we have executive power and we complied with the law. There were no due process violations. Everything we did with regard to these gangbangers was lawful. Supreme Court says, all right, the application for a stay, because the lower level judge was ordering the Homeland Security and Immigration to bring them back and do stuff with them and give them access to counsel and give them access to more hearings and schedule hearings and essentially treat them as though they were still here, even though they were already afueroed out of the country according to the law. So Trump asked for a stay. Supreme Court, Judge Murphy, Biden's judge, is making us do insane stuff. Can you please stop him? Answer, yes, we can. Is granted, 6-3. The April 18th order, the preliminary injunction that came out from Murphy, is stayed. Okay, the preliminary injunction is now paused. That's essentially the TRO, the temporary restraining order, kind of one and the same thing. But it's the order from the judge to Trump to do something. Your pause, pending the appeal all the way up through the courts. Now, if this comes back up to the Supreme Court, Then we'll deal with it then. But as it stands, Brian Murphy, the judge, you are stopped. You cannot order Trump to do these things. It is the preliminary injunction. It is stayed. They didn't mince words here. They didn't say, well, only half of it is stayed. Or the actual injunction is stayed, but anything that came after that is also fair game, right? The case is paused. It is now on appeal. Stop your behavior, Judge Murphy. But the dissent came out, the three libs, they said this. And mind you, this is on behalf of these gangbangers in this case. 7 of them who abused and murdered an elderly woman, who assaulted and violated a mentally disabled person, and who abused someone under the age of 12. Disgusting people. But Sotomayor, Jackson, and Kagan, they don't care about their life or their deaths at all. But they will reference that. They'll say, in matters of life and death, right, these libs, it is best to proceed with caution unless it's American life or death, and they don't care. In this case, the government took the opposite approach. No, they didn't. They cared about Americans who were being murdered by these lunatics. In this case, the government took the opposite approach. It wrongfully deported one plaintiff to Guatemala, even though some other judge said he was going to face torture there. Don't know who that is. Then, in clear violation of another court order, it deported 6 more to the South Sudan, a nation state that the department considers unsafe for all but its most critical personnel, right? So now they're just sympathizing with where they were sent. Unattentive Murphy, the lower level judge, and his timely intervention only narrowly prevented a third set of these monsters from going to Libya. Like, rather than allowing our lower court colleagues, writes the lib, to manage this high stakes litigation, why would they? Murphy is obviously and overstepping his bounds. Why would they just allow it to happen when he is acting unilaterally as the new president who's in charge of foreign policy and deportations? Says, I cannot join in a gross an abuse of this court's discretion. She says federal law permits the government to deport non-citizens found to be unlawfully in the United States only to countries with which they have a meaningful connection, she says. And Congress hasn't given them a meaningful connection. You're not allowed to deport these people. And it's all in the dissent. Now, at a subsequent hearing, the district court granted the motion for a class. All the illegals became a class, granted the injunction, said that they have shown that these third-party removals violated due process, made up out of their butts because these people were already adjudicated to be removable. On May 7th, plaintiffs' counsel received news reports announcing the removal, so they sued. Then they received reports of new removals, and it was happening fast. The district court found, right, this is where they're going to give this judge like a little escape hatch. They say the district court found that they, Homeland, violated my order, right? And so I might be stopped from enforcing the injunction, but the violation already happened. And so I can address that. Meanwhile, discovery proceeded. The judge ordered them to give him information, set up hearings and more. Government appealed. Now they're here asking for an injunction. And this is the lib team writing. But here, in a violation of an unambiguous TRO, the court is going to keep jurisdiction, saying Trump openly flouted 2 court orders. Murphy said, bring them back here. Bring them back to the United States. They said, that's not happening. In light of the government's flagrantly unlawful conduct, there's more harm. And so the district court's remedial orders, this is the key sentence, right, are not properly before this court. So in other words, Trump didn't ask for a stay on that, on the remedial orders. Judge says, you violated my injunction. Your injunction was illegal. Your injunction is now stayed. Yeah, but it wasn't stayed when I issued it. And I ordered you to do something and you didn't. That violation is like a separate independent case that they can deal with separately. And the judge will say, well, I've still got jurisdiction over that subcomponent. You say, what? That came from the original injunction, which was just stayed. It was violated. Yeah, but it wasn't stayed when I ordered you to do it at the time. And the law says you got to follow the court's order until you don't have to, right? Until you appeal it. Otherwise, you don't want to incentivize people to just break the law. They say, so the government has not appealed that. They have not sought a stay, right? And this is the key phrase. So we get like one sentence out of this whole thing. Second, the government adopted the narrowest possible remedy, allowing the government itself to choose whether they could return them or just give them due process where they were held, right? Give them attorneys and all the things. And it turns out they were like shoved in a closet somewhere, everybody, because they couldn't move them. The judge was like, your state. Like, okay, well, I guess we're staying here. Like, it's a 1 bedroom. Like, yeah, I know. Judge said, it's like 17 of us. Like, well, get comfy. And that's what happened. So that's what they're going to latch onto. So we don't need to read the rest of it. That's the main crux. Now, the judge is going to take that and run with it. It is in the dissent. It's not the majority holding. They said your injunction is stayed. So they're going to say, this judge, that actually no, the subcomponent was not stayed. And we got this order that came down from the judge. So after the Supreme Court issued that, he said, well, here's what my take is now. And what you saw is that the gangbangers, DVD, EFD, MMG, OCG, and the rest of them, they filed this. They said, Your Honor, enforce this from Trump. Make him give us process. Make him bring these people back. Give us action right now. And they actually filed this. Here's what it looked like. They said, here's a memorandum in support and on behalf of all these gangbangers, all 7 of them who attacked and abused Americans. And if you scroll all the way to the end, what we'll see is that they were asking for the court to either return them back to the country or fully comply with this court's previous order and restrain them from removing them to the South Sudan or any other third country, right? So they're kind of like in a holding pattern right now. So allow them to, Trump can bring them back or keep them there and give them process. We need you to enforce that right away. Then Trump responded. The judge responded and said the following. Says, all right, well, your motion there is unnecessary, so therefore it's denied. Because my May order on the remedy, right, a different order, remains in full force and effect, notwithstanding today's stay of the preliminary injunction, right? He's separating it out. Boasberg did the same thing. Supreme Court sent it back to him, said you have no jurisdiction. He says, well, I have contempt power, not remedy power, but contempt power. So I can issue a remedy, even though my injunction is stayed. It remains in full force and effect. And he is referencing the dissenting opinion. He says, the district court's remedial orders were not properly before the Supreme Court because the government has not appealed them, nor sought a stay pending the forthcoming appeal. That is in the losing position. You can't say that the majority didn't think that just because they didn't write it. That's not the holding. That's just like your opinion, lady. For the avoidance of doubt, and to the extent plaintiffs are indeed subject to third country removal, these others are included among them, referenced, so he tucks other illegals back into the protective order, right? And he's going to say it's a whole separate order. So the Supreme Court just said in their original opinion at the top that it was only the April 18th order. See the date? He said, well, I issued 2 orders, and so I'll just use the other one. Well, that second order came after your illegal first order, and it was based on that in the first place. So, of course, the Supreme Court could have clarified and give us a little bit more detail on this, but John Roberts and the Amy Coney Barrett and the rest of them apparently love illegals and love judges fighting for people who abuse and eliminate Americans. Now, we got Trump, who appealed that back up to the Supreme Court because this judge just said that. He said, well, I know what the Supreme Court said, but I don't give a crap. So what I'm going to do is still force you to comply with the remedy. This is from the judge Murphy. Trump turns around and asks for clarification. Taking this up to the Supreme Court of the United States, President Trump submitted the following, says, Your Honors, at the Supreme Court, we just got this ruling from you. He was stayed, and now he's acting out still. Writing, all right, Supreme Court, this motion addresses Judge Murphy's unprecedented defiance of this court's authority, a judicial insurrection, a judicial coup. Yesterday evening, just hours after this court stayed the preliminary injunction in this case, the district court issued an order asserting that its related ruling that is enforcing the injunction. So the injunction is bad, but my order enforcing that injunction is allowed. And that remains in full force and effect. notwithstanding today's ruling, which stayed the injunction. The district court claimed that several, quote, individuals whose removal it previously halted mid-flight and whose resulting detention in Djibouti, which is where they're being shoved in that closet, in precarious circumstances, was a focal point of the government's stay application, in fact. They said, we don't want them to continue to be forced to be in Djibouti. That's why we want to be able to move them around. So please stay this judge so we can do our job, because he halted us like in the middle of the trip. Like 3 hours to go. You have to pull over and just wait. Remain subject to its order enforcing the very injunction. It's saying the Supreme Court stayed you, and now he's saying, no. They only stayed my decision, but not the enforcement of that decision. And so I can still enforce the decision. You say, what? That is untenable. This court's stay order divested you, Judge Murphy, and your order of enforceability. It's gone. It equally applies to the original injunction, the remedial order enforcing that injunction, and the order last night, asserting that the remedial order remained in full force. Now, the district court's ruling of last night, Judge Murphy, is a lawless act of defiance. It's an insurrection. It's a rebellion against the lawful order of the Supreme Court. It disrupts sensitive diplomatic relations and slams the brakes on the executive's lawful efforts to effectuate these removals. In fact, for over 2 months now, says Trump, the executive has labored under an injunction that this court, you, the Supreme Court, you deemed unenforceable yesterday. You said yesterday he couldn't do it, and he's doing it still. What the hell's going on? This court should immediately make clear that this judge enforcement order has no effect, and put a swift end to the ongoing irreparable harm to the executive branch and its agents who remain under baseless threat of contempt as they're forced to house dangerous criminal aliens at a military base in the Horn of Africa that now lies on the borders of a regional conflict. Yesterday, the Supreme Court, you entered an order staying Murphy's preliminary injunction, and then hours later, they filed an emergency motion. They said that, Murphy, you can't actually do what the Supreme Court said you can't do, saying stop them from getting thrown out to third countries, right? So emergency. Now, they asked the district court to enforce its second order, a remedial order, which is based on the injunction. But that May order is not a separate injunction. It merely enforced the original April 18th injunction. It was part of an effort by the judge to clarify the injunction's original terms and to remedy what the court saw as violations by trying to remove these people to the South Sudan. Now, perhaps aware of the glaring flaw in asking a district court to enforce an order that itself merely enforced an injunction stayed by this court, they alternatively moved for a new order. I think this first argument sucks, but how about you issue a new one? Barring the government from transferring any of the criminal aliens from Djibouti to a third country. Now, without hearing from the government, then Murphy, we just saw, issued a ruling by docket entry. We just read that little tiny paragraph. Trump didn't even respond to that, saying that the motion was unnecessary. Okay, he doesn't even need your motion, so that's why he doesn't need Trump to issue a response, because he's just going to issue a ruling here on the ground that its remedial order remains in full force and effect, saying the court did not issue any new injunction. No, that's not what happened. It didn't cite any support for its action besides one single sentence from a dissent from yesterday's stay. It's the losing position, so it doesn't count. You can't take that and incorporate that as the holding and say, see, she said so. It's the whole point. Now, the district court's ruling of last night is indefensible for Murphy. As noted, when an appellate court stays an injunction, it divests the order of its enforceability. Now, this court stay order from the Supreme Court suspended Murphy and his source of authority to act. And having lost the authority to act, he can't issue a remedial order. That conclusion applies with particular force here, where the other order also explicitly purported to do nothing more than clarify. Indeed, the May 21 order, the second one, could hardly be clearer. One order was entitled Memorandum on a Preliminary Injunction. That is the now stayed order. The second order was an order on remedy for violation of the preliminary injunction. And the court ordered the following remedy and then listed them. So the original injunction, when the original injunction was stayed, so too were all of the follow-up enforcement mechanisms. Once a tree is uprooted, the branches don't continue to thrive. This judge is trying to make that happen. Now, that this court's stay of the injunction, 18th, the first one, deprives the remedy. This was the commandment, and this is the breaking of the commandment. The order of prospective effect is especially clear. In its application to you, Supreme Court, we emphasize the disastrous effect of the remedial measures, saying we had to shove these people like in a closet in Djibouti. In particular, the government repeatedly emphasized the injury that it continues to suffer because all of our flights were halted in the middle of the air, landing in Djibouti. Now, indeed, yesterday's dissenting opinion recognized that the government located its source of injury to May 21, and she says those are not properly before this court. But this reasoning did not command a majority of the court. If that was the right opinion of the court, they would have found that way. Nowhere in their stay opposition did they suggest that staying the 18th injunction would have no effect on the criminal aliens in Djibouti, because whether the second order was not properly before the court, whether it was or not, it was divested of enforceability. It's connected to the original injunction. Now, consistent with prior case law, the majority of this court, 6-3, granted the stay that Trump requested without any suggestion that the stay failed to extend to the worst of the worst criminal aliens described in our briefing, or any suggestion that its stay would not remediate the irreparable injury done that it's caused to us by having to detain these people in the Horn of Africa. Now, the district court was not free to ignore the Supreme Court's decision, John and Amy, or to insist that it can enforce the very injunction that you said he couldn't. So for these reasons, there is currently no injunction in place. That's what you said, barring the removal of the aliens to Djibouti. Now, this court has stayed the first injunction, which means the orders that came in the aftermath of that injunction are also stayed. And Murphy's ruling of last night is not a new injunction. Rather, it denied a new temporary restraining order based on an erroneous premise that's wrong. But the latest ruling from Murphy confronts the government with an intolerable Hobson's choice by holding the threat of contempt over the government if it acts according to this court, the Supreme Court's ruling, and proceeds with these removals. We could be in trouble. So the government requests this court, you Supreme Court, immediately clarify that its stay of the injunction extends to part 2, the remedy. In addition, an immediate administrative stay is now warranted of both. So come out and say both. Make clear beyond any doubt the government can immediately proceed with the third country removals and send them back to Djibouti. As the government detailed, the district court's injunction has created an unstable and dangerous situation at the military base. It's become even more dangerous since they're bombing each other, or were. In addition, given the district court's defiance of this court's stay order and respondent's motion for a new TRO, further steps may be appropriate under the law. For instance, this court may wish to direct Murphy not to issue further injunctions. Give him the old legal backhand. Tell him to get pre-clearance from this court. There's precedent for this. And the alternative, given the court's conduct, you Supreme Court may consider ordering that this case be reassigned to a different judge because he's biased and not capable of being fair and impartial. And so for the reasons stated, this court should immediately clarify that its stay of the injunction extends to the second order and grant an immediate stay of all the orders and enter any other relief that it deems appropriate under the circumstances. Signed by D. John Sauer, Solicitor General over there for President Trump. So that's off to the Supreme Court. We'll keep our eye on that one and see what they have to say about it. But reaction from the DOJ, Chad Mizell says, last night, hours after the Supreme Court 6-3 blocked the Boston district judge lawless actions and preliminary injunction, the judge announced business as usual and said its orders enforcing the injunction remained in effect when a single district judge immediately and flagrantly defies the Supreme Court. This is Chad Mizell from the DOJ speaking, Chief of Staff at the DOJ. That is not the rule of law. It is Article 3, insurrection. He's right about that. These judges know what they're doing, and they're just being clever about it. It's just like somebody stealing a candy bar out of a grocery store. You might think you're clever because you shoved it in your sock or something, or jacket, but it's still theft. You didn't get caught. You can talk your way out of it or find some justification for it, but you know what you did is wrong. So Chad Mizell posted about that. Now we had other reaction here, including Stephen Miller, which I thought, he said, a Boston judge openly defying and nullifying a Supreme Court order is a radical escalation of the communist coup taking place within the judiciary. Shouting out Julie Kelly, also on X, saying these judges are just operating to stop Trump as best they can. So we have that. Stephen Miller was fuming about this last night. Here's what he had to say.
Yes, this is an incredible victory, the Supreme Court win. It allows President Trump, as the law has long said, but the courts have blocked, it allows President Trump to send illegal aliens convicted of rape, murder, homicide, assault, battery, crimes against children to any country around the world that is willing to accept them. So whether that be South Sudan, or whether it be Somalia, or whether it be Ethiopia, any country in the world that is willing to accept these monsters, we can get them out of our country and be free of them forever. The only thing I have to share tonight, Sean, in a little bit of breaking news, is that the district court judge in Boston has said he's going to defy the Supreme Court's ruling. So expect fireworks tomorrow when we hold this judge accountable for refusing to obey the Supreme Court.
All right. And they did take that up to the Supreme Court. So we'll see what comes out in the aftermath of that. But we also saw that RFK Jr. was getting into it today. And a lot of this illegal immigration stuff is very concerning. But one of the most, I think, concerning elements of the whole thing is that there are hundreds, literally hundreds of thousands of missing children that came across the border, and they were just handing them out like Democrat votes. Here you go. Just here, want a kid, want a kid, want a kid. And it was happening every month, and it was enabled and facilitated by our own government. Thankfully, that's not happening anymore. These people who would lecture us about humanitarian causes are the ones actually facilitating human trafficking. Disgusting. But here is RFK Jr., who was in Congress today testifying about what Health and Human Services has found in relation to these kids being funneled throughout our country.
The major reason that the Biden administration lost track of all those children is because they were emphasizing speed over security. And there were political reasons for that. They wanted to get the kids out of U.S. custody, so they were handing them off to anybody. They didn't require background checks. They didn't require identification even. I've watched horror stories of the same person picking up child after child after child, using different names and different addresses. One of the addresses was a strip club. One of the addresses was a parking lot. One of the addresses was an empty lot that was filled with shipping containers. And this character was getting all these kids. One person got 42 kids to one address. What we're doing now is DNA testing on every sponsor. We're doing personal identification. We're doing background checks, and we're doing income verification.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Good developments there, but you can just see how disgusting that was. Nobody was looking into it, or they knew it was going on and they were facilitating it. So all that is happening over there. Meanwhile, Kristi Noem says, under President Trump's leadership, we are working at turbo speed to deliver cost-effective and innovative ways to deliver on the American people's mandate for mass deportations of criminal illegal aliens. We will expand facilities and bed space in just days, thanks to our partnership with Florida. Shout out to Florida, thank you. These new facilities will in large part be funded by FEMA's Shelter and Services Program, which the Biden administration used as a piggy bank to spend hundreds of millions of American taxpayer dollars to actually house the illegal aliens. And as we've talked about, Viral NYC News over on X has said the same thing, that he's there watching what's going on at the housing and shelters of illegals, saying there was absolutely child trafficking happening in those arenas. Sick. Saying, including the Roosevelt Hotel that served as the Tren de Aragua base of operations and even sheltered Laken Riley's murderer. Sick behavior happened under the prior administration, but now Kristi Noem, President Trump, and the DOJ are fighting hard to hopefully win over the Supreme Court to say Trump is following the law, and these lower level judges like Brian Murphy, who took office like 2 years ago, appointed by Joe Biden in his final moments of dementia, are not actually the president. And he's not actually the Supreme Court. And when they speak, their rulings should be heard. And John Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett and the rest of them who've been soft up there on these issues now should be acting. And so should Congress. Schmidt and the rest of them are in Congress. You know, they can impeach and remove the judges. There is that constitutional power to do that. So we'd like to see it happen. If they're all going to use the phrase judicial coup and judicial insurrection, which is what this is, we've been covering it since January 20th, since the very first lawsuits were filed here. If that's what it is, then they have a responsibility. They have a duty and an obligation to go out and use their position in Congress to act as a lawful check on the judiciary and impeach and remove these judges. We're going to keep our eye on this case. We'll see what the Supreme Court says. Thank you for subscribing if you're just joining us, and thanks for coming back here on the next one. All right, now we're not done yet, though. We got to talk about this Biden Autopen situation, because this is a fun one. Oh, how the tables have turned. You remember how Joe Biden, as soon as he stole the election and took the White House, how he said that he was going to basically eliminate all of the protections that the prior Trump administration had. One of those protections, of course, is called executive privilege. Trump came in again, and now he has the same power that Joe Biden used against him. There was this old, gentlemanly agreement between the presidents. You come in, you protect the executive privilege of the one going out. It's your office now, but you don't violate the confidences of the guy who is there behind you, right? Unless you're Joe Biden, you come in here and you're being governed by Democrats and you have no idea what the heck's going on. Then they waived executive privilege, which means that certain people had to come and testify, like Steve Bannon. If he didn't show up and testify or whatever, then he could be prosecuted under Peter Navarro, right? Then they could be prosecuted. And that none of this privilege actually was extended now that Joe Biden was in charge. Well, now Joe Biden is gone. And now we've got questions about his administration. And now the White House just sent a letter back to Biden's aide, the old reversal. Her name, of course, is Neera Tanden. She's going to appear, was today, before the House Oversight Committee to get asked questions about Biden's broken brain. The letter argues that asserting executive privilege is not justified because of the allegations. Says the president authorizes you, waives you to provide unrestricted testimony irrespective of potential privilege, right? The White House is waiving it, so you don't have it anymore, Neera. Here's the letter they sent to her. They said, all right, Miss Tanden, the Honorable, says, I write regarding a request for testimony issued to you by the House of Representatives, James Comer, saying, in light of unique and extraordinary nature of the matters under investigation, President Trump has determined that an assertion of executive privilege is not in the national interest, and so we don't need it. And therefore, it's not justified with respect to the particular subjects within the purview of the Oversight Committee. Now, these subjects include your assessment of Biden's mental fitness for the office of the president and your knowledge of who exercised executive powers during his administration. The extraordinary events in this matter constitute exceptional circumstances warranting an accommodation to Congress. So, smartly drafted, right? Trump is not saying, yeah, we just send everybody over there to talk about anything. Like, we're very protective of our executive privilege. But Biden's broken brain is so exceptional that we are going to make an exception in this case. evidence that aides to former President Biden concealed information about his fitness to exercise powers and that he may have unconstitutionally exercised those powers themselves to aid in their concealment, it implicates both Congress's constitutional and legislative powers. The Constitution of the United States also empowers Congress with the ability to remove the president under the 25th Amendment when the president, vice president, and the cabinet attempt to remove a president who's unable to perform the duties of the office. Now, Nira, as was explained in the letter that we sent to you before requesting your testimony, Congress, in the letter that they sent to you, right, this is coming from the White House, Congress may consider a legislative response to the information you provide. And so we've thought about it. And after balancing their interests and our interests, as is required under the accommodation process, it is the president's view that this presents an exceptional situation and Congress's need for the information outweighs the executive branch's interest in confidentiality, especially given the Trump administration and the executive branch's own interest in determining the validity of prior executive actions. That is huge, right? What was lawful? What is the chain of custody for all of those pardons that came down for Liz Cheney and Adam Shifty Pencilneck on the J6 committee? Why did Fauci need that pardon? And was it valid? Was Hunter Biden's pardon valid, or did he auto-pen it to himself on the way out? If you can show that those documents, I think, were out of order and that there's good evidence that Biden didn't know what the heck he was doing or didn't sign those himself or didn't go through the appropriate approval process, might be an argument there. And our position on it has long been just charge them. You just charge them anyways. Make them file a motion to dismiss. So some fanny somewhere can just, on our side can just charge somebody better, competent. I'm not saying, you get the point. But somebody on our side can just go charge Hunter for a crime and make him come in there and then put forward his pardon as something that immunizes him against the prosecution for that. And say, no, we don't think that it was actually lawfully valid and handed down from the president. And so now we're going to challenge it. But they continue. The president reached this view consistent with the practice established under the Biden administration, actually. President Trump, because they did it to Trump, Trump has decided that it would not be appropriate to assert executive privilege with respect to communications with former President Biden and his advisors and staff on matters related to the scope of the interview. They're also citing this case from 1977. Now, therefore, from Gary, Deputy Counsel to President Trump, given these extraordinary circumstances, including Trump's determination on executive privilege and having reviewed the scope of the interview that's about to happen, the President, Nira, authorizes you to provide unrestricted testimony to the House Oversight Committee, irrespective of any potential privilege. They sat down today. We'll see what she said. This accommodation is unique to the facts and circumstances of this matter and to their interest. And so for the same reasons underlying his decision on executive privilege, Trump has determined that he will not assert immunity to preclude you from testifying before them either. So you are required to go in there. And they did that same thing to Trump people when they stole it from him. In light of Trump's determination not to assert executive privilege, we are not requesting that agency counsel be permitted to attend the deposition. Should you have any questions, let me know. Sincerely, Gary Lakowski. So you no longer have the protection of the White House. You covered up for a guy. You thought that your cover-up would enable him to remain in power and you'd still have your protections in the aftermath, but that has not happened. And so that was the letter sent out. We also are seeing that she prepared her statements for her opening depo today. This came out from Nira. And here is what she said to James Comer today. We're going to hear from Comer coming up next. She says, all right, I am Nira Tandon, and I am here in response to Comer. He sent a letter saying that I participate in this transcribed interview. Hopefully we get the transcripts. As the committee staff knows, my counsel and I have been willing to voluntarily cooperate with this committee. I'm here to answer questions about my service in the Biden admin. Now, my cooperation should not be taken to mean that I think that this investigation is worthy of oversight. I don't believe it is. Indeed, millions of Americans wonder why this committee has conducted no oversight of the current administration on topics far more worthy of this, including the Qatari jet, Trump's meme coin, lawless attacks on universities and crap law firms, and excesses of ICE officers who are removing illegals from our country because Nira loves the gangbangers. In this country, at this time, we need real oversight. So let me discuss my service, which is what we're asking about. Thank you for your little screed there, Nira. Says, in May 21, Biden named me as senior advisor with a portfolio on a bunch of issues. And I was named staff secretary and senior advisor in 21. Got a promotion quickly. As staff secretary, I was responsible for handling the flow of documents to and from the president. I was also authorized to direct that Autopen signatures be affixed to certain categories of documents. It's her. We had a system for authorizing the use of the Autopen that I inherited from prior administrations. So is she blaming Trump? We employed a system throughout my tenure as staff secretary. So in May 23, I was named head of the president's domestic council. From that point forward, I no longer served. I was no longer responsible for the overall flow of documents and no longer had any responsibilities in connection with the use of the Autopen. So she's cut off there. As head of the Domestic Policy Council, I did have periodic discussions with Biden on a range of issues. And I would note that much of the public discussion on the subject matter of this hearing has been conflated. Two very different issues. First, the president's age, and second, whether Biden was in command. She writes, I had no experience in the White House that would provide any reason to question his command as president. He was in charge. And I'm here. I'm prepared to answer your questions, says Nira. Here's what James Comer said about it when he was getting prepped up on this hearing that's going to be taking place today in Comer's conference room.
There are sources that say that she had a big impact on making decisions as to which documents would be placed into the Autopen. What we've identified first are the 4 employees that we believe manually put documents into the Autopen, pressed the power button, and signed Joe Biden's name on them. Next batch of people that we're going to bring in are people like Ron Klain, and we'll get to the names that the president has mentioned as well. Everyone that we've sent notice to that we expect them to testify has agreed to testify thus far, except the doctor, and I've subpoenaed him. You can come in voluntarily, and things work out a whole lot better than if you have to come in via subpoena. So I think this investigation is progressing, and all the concerns that President Trump raised will be addressed in these transcribed interviews and depositions.
I mean, I've got the letter from 2024 from Dr. O'Connor pertaining to Joe Biden's health, and there's absolutely no mention of any cognitive decline, and there's no mention of any prostate cancer, which, of course, the Bidens released and told the public after the Robert Hur tapes were released, which was obviously a tape showing Biden's cognitive decline. I want to get your take on that and what you make of that, and also this new information that we've got, that there were 3 different Autopens, Autopen A, B, and C.
Yeah, that's accurate. And, there's more information that's coming out daily. Luckily, we have a lot of former employees like Jean-Pierre who are coming out with books and interviews that are kind of painting a picture that Joe Biden really didn't know what was going on in his White House. This is important to our investigation because there were a lot of executive orders that were signed using the Autopen. There's really no excuse to use the Autopen on days when you're in the White House. Many of the documents that were signed with the Autopen were days that Joe Biden was actually in the White House. It's hard to explain that with respect to the doctor. If you'll remember, Joe Biden did an interview several years ago and said he had cancer. The White House quickly issued a statement saying, he misspoke. Now, how many people do you know in the history of the world that have misspoke saying that?
Yeah, and that was that oil slick. The windshields were covered in oil. That's why I and so many other people like me have cancer, when he was out there on that speech sitting in front of the Potomac or something.
They had cancer when they really didn't. So, there's evidence out there that would suggest that there's been a cover-up with respect to his cancer for many years, just based on Joe Biden's own words. So we've got a lot of evidence. There's more and more sources that are coming forward. The key to a good congressional investigation, Maria, is having whistleblowers. I don't know if if you would classify Jean-Pierre and people like Buttigieg as whistleblowers, but they're issuing statements and doing interviews that are very incriminating to Joe Biden, very incriminating to Joe Biden's doctor, and raise a lot of questions as to who was authorizing the use of that Autopen.
Well, I mean, Mr. Chairman, for 4 years, we all questioned some of these policies coming out of the White House that were so clearly anti-American. For example, leaving a wide open border and an unvetted border rather than actually understanding and knowing who's coming into the country. Millions of gotaways, 350 people encountered on the terrorist watch list. $7 trillion in spending leading to 40-year high inflation. Do you believe that there was a group of people who were actually pushing these anti-American policies and Joe Biden was unaware of it?
I believe it's very possible. If you look at Joe Biden's career, when he was on the Senate floor, he gave speeches, encouraging a border, a tight border. He encouraged, a process to get immigration. But when he became president, just out of the blue, the Autopen started signing executive orders that would allow an open border. And you have liberals in the Democrat Party that have risen the ranks through the bureaucracies here in Washington, D.C., that believe that we need to fundamentally change the appearance of America, that America's too white, that we need more immigrants to come in. We need more people that would end up being registered Democrats. That's a fact. So the possibility is there that there were deep state bureaucrats in the White House that were just using that Autopen to sign major legislation and major executive orders that Joe Biden had no knowledge of and never would have supported if you look at his previous 3 decades of public service.
No, that's just incredible. I mean, just to be...
It is incredible, no doubt about it. So James Comer's out there saying beginning today, White House officials will appear for these interviews. And so there's going to be a lot more to come. Hopefully Karine Jean-Pierre is on the list, and we'll keep our eye on what comes out of that. But hopefully we get some transcripts at least. We can read what these people say as part of their cover-up. They've got a lot of protection if they stick together, right? So you need to start seeing cracks in the facade. People like Karine writing books and Tapper slowly starting to unveil the truth is going to be welcomed in the coming years. So hopefully we get some good details from some of these interviews and Comer stays on it. We'll keep our eye on it as well. Thank you for subscribing and joining as we do. All right, my friends. Well, it has been a beautiful stream. And if you're just joining us, quick recap on what we talked about today. First and foremost, this judge, judicial insurrection, judicial coup. It's not me just saying that. It's a lot of other people, including Stephen Miller, who's in the White House, and Eric Schmidt, who is in the Senate. And questions about this also coming from the Department of Justice and Chad Mizell asking the same question. Why is the Supreme Court allowing this to happen and exploit presidential power from unelected hack judges? We went through what the Supreme Court wrote, 6-3 decision, major victory for Trump, which was fleeting for a moment until the judicial coup occurred down from Judge Brian Murphy of Massachusetts. But we read through that, got the bearing straight on it, saw what the gangbangers filed, and then saw what Trump submitted in response to the filing. And so we'll see if this judge continues to escalate, if he wants to hold Trump in contempt or what. Keep our eye on that one. And then, of course, we wrapped up with some Autopen stuff. So Trump strikes back, reverses the privilege, does exactly what Joe Biden did to him, just opens it back up because it's exceptional, just like January 6th was exceptional. So now we're going to do the same thing. This one, though, was actually real. Joe Biden was gone, and his whole presidency was exploited. And they set up January 6th to try to remove their biggest threat to their power so they could continue to have an invalid in charge. And so, my friends, what a beautiful stream it has been. Happy Tuesday. I hope you're having some tri-tips, some tomahawks, some T-bones, some tater tots, whatever you're having. I hope it's delicious and definitely not a taco. Now, let's see who's here. Thank you for supporting our show. Thank you again for subscribing if you haven't already done that. Welcome to our new membos who are joining us. We had a great members only stream this morning. What the heck we talk about this morning? I'm going to talk about great stuff. It's a ton of fun. Oh, yeah. And we have somebody who's cancer-free, too. What's going on? That's what we talked about. Nikki P, 5 years, cancer-free, over on the member stream from this morning. Tons of fun and great news. Hey, here it is. It is T-Bone Tuesday, Tomahawk Tuesday, Tater Tot, Tri-Tip Tuesday. No tacos at all. Throw them out. Take it out of your mouth right now. Dash Hound Lover. What's up, Dash Hound Lover? Thank you for becoming a membo. Shout out. Welcome aboard. Dash Hound Lover in the house. Will Crump is here. If this rebellious judge is not sanctioned and removed from the bench, then all judges will ignore SCOTUS rulings at their whim. Yeah, I mean, they're coming up with clever concoctions, which is how the law works, right? You can always kind of, well, I'll just do this and try this and try this. And if the Supreme Court is going to allow that to happen and not actually solve this, then I think you're right. It's going to continue to happen. It is. They could have solved this all a long time ago with Boasberg. They could have just said, okay, look, your injunction also applies to your contempt. They could have done it with Zenas. They could have done it when they scolded that district judge out of Texas. Remember that? But they don't. They're just allowing it to happen. It's a slow Article 3 coup is what it is. Hey, all hail Tarpon Springs tyrants. 22 months as a member saying, come on, guys, hit the thumbs up. Love the show. Love the show. Rob. All hail Tarpon Springs tyrants. Good to have you here. Thanks for being here for 22 months, my friend. We appreciate you being here. We've seen some serious stuff together. Doan, we're babysitting the left at the highest levels. Yeah, it does feel like that in many ways. And it feels like we tolerated a bunch of their temper tantrums for a while. Like, let them just like screech and shout about like DEI and all this crap. I'm like, all right, you're not like a child. Sit down. Will Crump, will this judge's rebellious follow-up also have to be appealed? Or can Trump solidly and legally stand on the SCOTUS majority opinion and ignore it? Well, he's not going to do that. So he's not ignoring it, is what we've seen. So he's taken the safe route, right? I think the concern that he talked about, the Hobson trap, is the idea that if he ignores it, then the judge is going to hold him in contempt, and that's going to create a bigger problem. And if he follows it, then he's harming himself. So he's just asking for the Supreme Court to clarify. Hopefully they do. And we just leave it there. Zha Zhang, 40 months as a membo, Zha? Oh my goodness. How many babies is that? I'm going to need to learn calculus to calculate that. Rob, we've been together for a big 40 months, baby. Great job. Zha, thank you for being here for 40 months. My goodness. Thank you for doing it. I mean, even amazing. It's a long time. It's like almost at the beginning. Thank you, Zha, for being here. What's up, Doan? Rival gangs like to project their beefs on social media. Yeah, she was claiming her territory there. Come on, SAs, get out there. You're acting like a bunch of pansies out there. We're fighting in the streets. Why don't you come join us? Former LEO. Didn't they try to convict Trump for calling for violence to further an insurrection? They tried to, they prosecuted him 4 different locations, tried to throw him off the ballot, tried to bankrupt him, and then also tried to rig the election. They tried a lot of things. It's Bruce Rice, baby. Dun, 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 dun. What's up, Bruce Rice, baby? Bringing in 50 new membos. Hey, Bruce Rice is here. Check out who's coming in. We got Steve is here. Todd, WCO. What's up, Hippie Hank? Jerry, Jamie, Kitty Rogers, Pew Hackett. What's up, Juju Bean? Natasha. We got Don, Kansas. Thomas Temple. Christina gifted a membo. What's up, Elohim? Rich H. Tora Williams. Jackie Joe, Dan Usher, Para, Jan, Suzmad, Susan, Sweet, Suit, Wendy. What's up, Opal, Lauren Wilson, Mighty Family of God is here. Oklahoma Chicken Cam, welcome. Can Do Attitude, C Money, what's up, Steph? Patty Talbot, Colby, Don, Ellie Summer, Super Chihuahua. We got Ronnie, Austin, Jacob. Depression is my life. Hopefully, not forever. Jameson, Kiki Lee, Calamity. See you later. What's up, Couture? Lori, Kathy, Wilcox, Inside of the Ages, Freddie Fairlane, and Surf Buddha. All gifted membos in the house, courtesy of Bruce Rice, baby. Dun, 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 dun. Thank you, Bruce, for doing that. And thank you, Tone. It is. It's Bruce Rice, baby. Lou Landry. What's up, Lou? And thank you, Bruce, for doing that. Lou Landry. Hey, Rob. Officer Tatum explains Israel in episode 127, time code 18 minutes and 16 seconds. Shout out to Officer Tatum. We talked to him a long time ago on our channel. Long time ago. When I was like brand new. I had no idea what I was doing. Anyways, still don't really know anything. But thank you, Lou, for that. And thank you, Sheila Poo. Says, Judge Murphy needs to either be impeached or removed for his bad behavior. I know. Or you know what else we could do, Sheila? Just have Congress talk about it for another 6 months, probably. And they can just sit there and complain about it and hold hearings, probably. Will Crump. SCOTUS can ask the First Circuit's Judicial Council to investigate the judge under Judicial Conduct and the Disability Act, but they're all lefties, so... Yeah, see, that's the problem. It's like the judges, the Democrats have the legal universities. They have all of the bar entities. Like they have all the, the people in the positions of the state bars. They were running the ABA. They have all the, biggest law firms in the country are all super lib. So they have an infestation, in other words, into the legal apparatus. And they protect themselves. That's why Fannie Willis can get away with committing some of the most unethical conduct. Like, where's the state bar? They're all Fannie's friends. King of Biltong. Hey, get your Biltong. You can use code Robert over at BiltongUSA.com. Lots of good stuff over there. Premium air-dried beef Biltong, savory flavors, bold, high protein, low carb. So try it out. BiltongUSA.com. We got Michael Roby. What's up, Michael? Thank you for becoming a member and supporting our show. We'll see you on the members only stream. And Membo, stick around. We're going to do an after party. We got Doan. Brave talk from Nira. The Autopen scandal could vacate 4 years of U.S. political history with grave legal implications. Someone is going to cave. Yeah, there was a lot of game left on this one, but hopefully the inquiry continues. Thank you, Doan. Hey, Amber Mellenbacher. What's up, Amber Mellenbacher? Thank you for becoming a member. Grab that stream from this morning. We talked about a lot of good stuff over there. And the Rubos are here. They just shared this post over from the president. Let's see what the president just posted over on Truth. What is this? Trump just posted this one? Yeah, just minutes ago. Let's see what he posted.
Just some advice, because you come under fire a lot. Our moms are standing for things that often the media attacks them on. We'd love to get some advice from you about running for office.
Yeah, so I would say don't do it.
Yeah.
No, run for office. We want you to run for office.
I do say this, though. It is nastier to run as a Republican than it is. Now, I'm the ultimate, they suffer from a thing called TDS. Do you know what that is?
Yes.
TDS, it's a horrible, horrible terminal disease.
It's true.
It destroys the mind. It destroys the mind before the body, but the body eventually goes. TDS is Trump derangement syndrome. They have it at levels. They can't even stand their life. They can't stand anything. And, part of the reason is I won an election which everybody said couldn't be won.
Yeah, it's true. They are obsessed with the dude, and their entire basis of existence is based around it. Thank you to the Rubos, RuboSaltShop.com. Check them out. Milo Phone Bill. I voted for President Trump, not an Autopen administration. Yeah, I don't think anybody voted for Autopen administration. I mean, many of them were trying to get that again. That's basically what Kamala would have been, an extension of that. What's up, Milo? Thank you. Rob on Rumble says Tom Homan needs to start to arrest the judges for obstructing ICE from deporting the illegal aliens, right? I think it's an interesting idea, but the judges would say, we have judicial immunity for writing that illegal opinion. We're immune from that. M, what's up? Says Trump should go full Andrew Jackson. Yeah. With the illegals, you mean? Like a trail of pupusas, I guess is what you're saying. Right? It's not fun. The Native Americans got, pretty taken, like it's manifest destiny and conquest. It's just what happens, but it was pretty brutal for a lot of them. But yeah, Andrew Jackson. So in other words, yeah, trail of pupusas all the way back to Guatemala. Knox is here. Happy T-Bone Tuesday, all. Everything I get from criminal defense orgs, Justia, and even the nonpartisan appellate review lean heavily pro-immigrant. Totally. Yeah. I don't know why a lot of it, even the professors, right? So like you go to law school, it's just this liberal bend to it. I have no idea why. I never got it. To me, the law seems pretty conservative, but it's not. A lot of people use it as the mechanism, right? When you talk about political realists and political idealists, the political idealists are, a lot of people are, idealists are kind of, a lot of lawyers, and I have a lot of idealism to me too, but a big heavy dose of realism. And you can recognize that there are, natural incentives in the world, and people operate according to their self-interest, and you want to allow that to, to be utilized in a productive way. On the other side, people will say that the law should be a reformation tool where they can get in there and change the law and exact social justice using the law as an institution that they set up because they're idealists. And so Knox, it is a phenomenon. Knox is a defense attorney in Texas, so that's good input. Pinochet's helicopter tours, what's going on? Says Article 3 may be infected by communist Democrats and their ideology, but Article 2 has the monopoly on other enforcement mechanisms, which hopefully nobody ever has to use, right, Pinochet? Best helicopter ride you've ever been on. Deluxe Night. Mrs. Deluxe Night finally got her membership. Congratulations to Amber. Amber Deluxe Night? Farmer's wife is in the house? Oh my gosh. Well, we're very excited about that, Deluxe Night. Thanks for having your wife come join our community. Welcome, Amber. And we appreciate you joining us. And thank you for growing our food and with helping your husband do that. Chat with me says, we appreciate you. Chat with me. The problem, Rob, is the law is conservative and it has been infiltrated by liberals to remake our nation. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Chat with me. They're using it as a prescriptive tool, right? They can go in and change things to be how they want it to be. And a lot of them make a lot of money in the things that they have to, they stand for. It's interesting. Like you'll notice like a lot of like immigration lawyers are like just very sympathetic on the plight of immigrants. These are such good people. It's like, is that because your law firm is growing by 1,000% every single year because the government created 20 million new clients for you? Is that why you're so in love with the immigrant plight? Because Biden gave you 20 million new clients. Now Trump is giving you 20 million new clients again on the deportation on the way out. So that you see a lot of like, we have to work so hard. It's okay, yeah, because you're making millions of dollars. Happening with law firms, happening with NGOs, happening with healthcare providers, happening with all, housing and everywhere. It's a huge class of people that all were brought into our country illegally. Neuro D, what's going on? Oh, we're going back on that for our after party. We're going to say what's up to our YouTube friends. Amber Mellenbacher says Deluxe Night's wife is here. Okay, so this is interesting. Deluxe Night is over on Locals, but Mrs. Deluxe Night, Mrs. Amber, is over on YouTube. So they have different platforms. That's okay. Might be healthier for the relationship, in fact. Says Deluxe Night's wife here. Just going to say our resident farmer is the most awesome, sweet man ever. It's true. Deluxe Night is a very, very awesome and sweet man. Handsome man, too, and a beautiful beard. Says, he does shout outs for me all the time here, but that man is my favorite human sending a shout out. Amber and Deluxe Night. What a lovely marriage you two have. Thank you for sharing that with us so that we can all aspire to sharing that same love and romance out there with the rest of the world. You guys are awesome. Thank you for that. Thanks for both joining up. Shout out to you both. Hopefully you have a beautiful night tonight. And we'll see you tomorrow together on the members only stream. Hey, JV Dan. What's up, JV? And thank you for becoming a membo and joining us. All new membos, stick around after the show because we're going to have an after party. We're going to take a brief intermission for 2 minutes and then come back and say what's up, debrief, see what you thought of the show, take some final comments, and hang out for a little bit more. We got a couple other comments before we call it a day. I just saw this one come in from Knox. Says, I agree with you, Robert, on the law professors. They were all smugly liberal. I was liberal myself back then, early 2000s, and they were way left of me to the point of me feeling like a conservative. Yeah. Law professors, super lib. Deluxe Knight says, for all you gluten intolerant friends out there, back on track today with another 50 acres of buckwheat planted out there. On another note, POTUS had interestingly pleased comments this morning. LOL. In all reality, Amber actually introduced me to your show. You rock, Rob. Shout out to Amber. You know, that's how it normally is. Thank you for that, Deluxe Knight. Thank you, Amber, for bringing our resident farmer to come join us. It's great to have you both here. Really appreciate you both. Thanks for saying that. Okay, so my friends, we're going to leave it there. We're going to go check out, hang out with the Locals fam and our YouTube Membo fam, but we're going to call it a day here. And so I want to thank you for being here, being a part of the stream, being a part of the show, and being amazing. We are also going to thank our mods and meme smiths. We got Donut, John, K-Bean, Carrie B, on the fort down for us. Also want to thank Jigum, Elliot, Just Rhonda, and our friends on Rumble, Neuro D, Janek, and Dog Digger, modding the fort down for us over there as well. Grateful for you. Thank you for helping with the show. The Rubos saying Trump's also on a roll. He's posting more funny stuff. He must be feeling good. Yet another funny Trump post. He's probably just bored on the plane. That's funny. Bored on the plane, scrolling. Bored on the plane, post. Funny. All right, Rubos, thank you for that. My friends, it has been a beautiful and an amazing stream. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for subscribing on your way out if you haven't already done so. Thanks for liking this video if your thumbs work. We will come back tomorrow. Members, stick around because we're going to debrief a little bit further. Otherwise, my friends, we're going to leave it there on the day. We are coming back here tomorrow to get into it again. And in order to do that appropriately, we are going to need to see you right back here so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Make it a beautiful night, my friends. Sleep very well. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching, my beautiful friends. Now it's that time where the stream must end. You brought the heat with every chat and line. Together we expose corruption. One more time we dove in the truth where the media hides. Lit up the lies with receipts on all sides. The fight isn't over, but we made them sweat. We ain't done yet, no, not just yet. Because together we are watching the watchers. Truth on our side. Watching the watchers. We won't be denied. Watching the watchers. Eyes open wide. Fighting for freedom with nothing to hide. Drop a like and don't forget to share. And bring a friend who's ready to care.